Who needs the Hoff when you've got the Heff? One man army, Neil Heffey. Welcome to Eyes Wide Open.
Thanks a lot.
Good to see you. How you doing?
And you?
Yeah.
I'm not bad.
Did you have a good Christmas?
Yeah, it wasn't bad.
No?
Spent it with the family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've just travelled over from Bulgaria for Christmas because you've been staying over there. What's it like over there? I mean, are you sorry that you've come here for Christmas or what?
No, not really. I mean, I'm happy to be here because of the family, but sorry to be here because it's England. You know, It's a shithole, innit?
Oh, mate.
It's. I've been enjoying it over there. I went over there just over a year ago, on and off, back and forth. Obviously, I've got things that I've got to deal with here. But yeah, it's just been a relaxing time in my life.
We spoke earlier about it. You told me that you just made the cut-off point of being able to get back before they closed all the flights due to this new outbreak.
Well, I think it's a lot of fear-mongering, isn't it? Because I got notifications from a number of people that are over there to tell me that they'd cancelled all the flights as of the 21st. I caught the last flight out on the 20th, which was by some fluke, but I don't know whether that was misinformation or what, because my brother was travelling over there on the 27th, and he's gone. So you can travel. Some of the flights are still on, but they're making it mandatory now that you've got to have a test when you
get into
the country. Yeah.
And is that new?
It's new, that, yeah.
Yeah, because Bulgaria's been outside of the remit of all this test and stuff.
Well, no, Bulgaria is just a port of the country, isn't it? So, they're not... I mean, the health minister there, he's probably been fired. The last health minister spoke out against the corona and said it's a scam, it's a common flu.
The health minister of Bulgaria?
The health minister of Bulgaria. Now, they've got someone else in. I think that's... I'm not sure whether they've got someone else. I haven't really been following it, to be honest, too much.
How long have you been in Bulgaria? Roughly?
I first went over there in May 2019 after I'd finished the trial. The last trial I was on, which was the terrorism offences, left. It was too much, I was under a bit of an attack myself. I was also a bit exhausted from what that took out of me. So I left. I've been back and forth. Came back here in February this year when the corona, once I was watching the American politics and seeing about the notifications that went through to Trump and doing the China ban on the 31st of January. And at that time, I don't think anyone knew what it was. And I was quite concerned. I didn't want to end up being stuck away from my children and my wife and something happened. So I flew back over on the 28th of February, I think it was, and then became stuck here for 3 months until the May. Once we started to find out a lot more about it, it was it's quite clearly not as deadly as what it was said.
Yeah, it's you're the first person to be able to come on here and give us the perspective of the COVID operation from another country. Now we know in this country and America and other Western European countries, it's it's hardcore, isn't it? It's hardcore in the press, hardcore across the media. The government are all fully on board, and all of the the sciences and stuff like that. What's it been like in Bulgaria?
To be honest, you wouldn't really notice the difference. I mean, other than face masks, they made it mandatory. They did shut down at the same time as I was over here. So their initial response and reaction was, I think, quicker than England's, in that they shut down flights to all people travelling in. You had to have residency card. It was quite difficult, but that country's got an older population, so a lot of
Bulgaria has.
Bulgaria, yeah. It's a lot of the younger Bulgarians will travel to the EU, to work. The wages, salaries are better, etc. So it's more prosperous for them, and then they'll send the money home to family. But it's quite an ageing population.
Have they been having hardcore masks and all the other tests and all that bullshit?
There hasn't been any tests. They did have some testing facilities put in place for people that wanted to go to the hospitals, I think. But to be honest, it's the only time I'd hear about corona was when I put Sky News on.
You come home.
Well, either you come home or, I'm understanding quite a bit of Bulgarian language now, but it wasn't first. There's only so much TV you can watch and not understand what's getting said. So, one of the main news channels that I get over there is Sky News, and that's just, watch first 5 minutes of every day. It's a repeat for the rest of the day,
it's
isn't
just constant
it?
fear,
It's constant corona. You wouldn't know it existed over there for months and months. Bar, I think it's pressure from the funding that's available from the EU. I think there's 2 countries that was vetoing or blocking the funding packages, and that was Poland and Hungary. Poland and Hungary. But yeah, other than that, you wouldn't know it was there. You go into the main supermarkets, you know, you'd have to wear a mask, and I'd do so. You know, everyone says about, no, I don't believe in wearing masks at all. I believe that it's stupid, but at the end of the day, there's a lot of old people who don't get to look at the internet like we.
You want to be a nice guy, don't you?
Yeah. Well, you know, I was always brought up to have respect for my elders. So.
Oh, very nice, very nice. Okay, so what are your thoughts on, since you've been back? You know, what you're thinking on how things are developing in the UK currently, and also what are your thoughts on what's going on in America?
Well, I mean, the UK is dead and buried, isn't it? You know, we're in a time and age where you haven't got any rights; they're all taken away from you. The corrupt practices that go on within law in this country is just, you know, they're insurmountable. It can take over your life, and it does take over a lot of people's lives, whether they're reporting on it, doing podcasts on it, working in the law itself, or you're a victim of what it is, and you're being brought before the courts. I just had enough of it myself here. I just think, you know, I spent too much time fighting a fight. Never, you know, children grow up. You can't get that time back. So now I'm trying to spend a little bit more time with the family.
I mean, because we've got a lot of history together. We go back a long way.
We have,
yeah. And you know, we forged the frontier of testing and trying out various legal, lawful, you know, tools that we were using to enforce our rights and find our way to freedom. And you know, in some instances we succeeded, in other instances we faced a brick wall. And you continued, you know, you went one step further and set up a law firm called DDE Law. Now, what I've noticed is that recently you've got a channel going on YouTube, which I've put some interesting videos up, and one of them that you put up, which was relevant to me, is as we've discussed previously, is that I got arrested in one of the protests, one of the anti-COVID or anti-lockdown protests, because, you know, we believe that they don't have the right to take away our fundamental rights in the first place, never mind, you know, all the other things that follow. And that protest was, you know, an opportunity for us to voice that. I got arrested under section 44 and 58 of the Serious Crime Act, which, you know, the title of that is misleading. And then, you know, we chatted a little bit about that briefly, and you've put up a video recently about giving people advice on what to do or how to handle an arrest at a protest. I mean, what are your thoughts on people and people standing up for their rights, their inalienable rights, I would say, you know, and what can they do to prevent arrest?
Well, rights are taken, they're not given. You know, we're all born with equal rights, so the law says, but the law keeps taking those rights away. Made this, you know, I left, just I wanted to get out of this, but obviously with people now waking up to the idea that this is a scandemic rather than a pandemic, you know, then it's become, I've been getting a lot more phone calls disturbing me peace, but all pretty similar questions, which was why I thought, well, I'll just do a video in a generalised sense of view. Is there's no defence available for you to be protesting against the Corona Act, because they've specified, well, you know, that it's something that's a criminal offence. Gone are the days of freedom when protesting is a criminal offence. But where they've done that, the only defence that you can have is if for instance, it's organised properly by, say, a philanthropist or some company or charitable organisation that does risk assessments.
But isn't George Soros a philanthropist? Well, can't say he organised it. Wouldn't that get us away with it?
I don't quite think he'd be on this side of the fence. I think he's more pushing from the other side.
Right, okay.
So, you know, it's a way of controlling people, so that only the ideals of big companies can be the ones that can be protested. You know, there's a lot of protests that have been going on over the months. I mean, fuck's sake, we've had protests about Black Lives Matter because of George Floyd. He was from America.
Yeah.
You know, can't we find something closer to home to protest about? Yeah. You know, it was a bit of a ridiculous thing. But if people want to protest, I'm for everyone's right to exercise and protest.
Well, you know, the right to assembly is a fundamental right. Who are they to tell me I can't assemble with people who want to assemble?
Well, under common law, it was a fundamental right.
Yeah.
You know, as so you just used the word inalienable. It's unalienable, right? Yeah. And the word unalienable is that a right that can't be taken away from you. So that's what the Americans benefit from, is they have unalienable rights.
Yeah.
But again, those rights are being threatened all the time. You know, their Second Amendment right for firearms, etc. That's being taken away from them, or certainly if Biden gets in, it's going to be taken away from them in large parts. We've already lost that right.
The right to bear arms?
Well, we haven't lost it. We've lost it by virtue of the Firearms Act, and the fact that we are constantly told that we can't bear arms or we can't have a firearm without a license, etc., which is a form of way of control. But I don't believe that is completely correct, because in order for a statute, an act, to take away a constitutional right, then it must expressly state it's going to do so.
The right to bear arms is a constitutional right?
It's a constitutional right, yeah.
That's interesting.
You know, the difference between our Constitution and the American Constitution is the American Constitution is quite clear. It's written on a piece of paper, you know, a couple of 100 years old. It just sets everything out in the articles.
Well, ours is by convention, isn't it, rather than it being written? So it's like, we've always done it this way, so therefore that's what our constitutional right is.
Well, the constitutional right is made up of a number of statutes, and the old statutes, like the Habeas Corpus Acts, the Act of Settlement, the Bill of Rights. You used to have the Statute of Marlborough. That was one that protected you against all of the bailiffs, as you'll know, going back, and that's completely been gutted like a fish.
Feels like another light sign, that one. Yeah, but there we go.
But all of these rights, you know, what can you do? If you're going to have a rebellion in England, you're going to be standing there with a McDonald's spork.
A peasant revolt with the sharpened fork.
You've got no chance. You know, this is one of the reasons.
But see, you know, it's interesting that you bring that up, because, I mean, we've gone off on a bit of a tangent here, but I think it's connected. But that's what makes the American Constitution so unique, is that it gives the people the right to bear arms. And people think, well, why would you want to give them arms? Because it's to protect themselves from the government.
Well, they're the biggest threat to any society in the
government.
world.
Yeah, you know, that's who the protection is there for, and it's the government who've taken that right away. So in this country, you know, and left us without any arms. I mean, everyone else has got them. The police have got them, the army have got them, all the criminals have got them, but it seems that the law-abiding citizens are the only ones that aren't able to protect themselves.
Bulgaria has a right to bear arms, just like America. So
really?
All the citizens bear arms. A lot of them carry them around with them. I've got arms myself over there, just because I could. I was just thrilled to be walking around with it. Didn't need it, didn't want it, but you know, sometimes in the countryside there was a bear in the loose round by our village, so you wouldn't want to be getting caught by one of them with nothing. But you know, there's no crime. There's very, very little crime. For what you'll read on blogs or media about how they'll slag off Bulgaria or these Middle Eastern countries, it's a lovely country. It's certainly worth a visit. And I chose to stay there, and I'm going to be settling down there.
Cool. Okay, so let's move it back to where we were on the protests. And what we can do. You know, how can we, you know, get the police to recognise that what they're doing is unlawful. Now, people can say that the police are following a lawful order, or you know, because the government have called it unlawful to protest, the police enforce that. But is that not the police following an unlawful law? You know.
Well, it's not that they're following an unlawful law. I mean, I think when the Corona Act was originally brought into force, I think there was good reason for it. I think if we did face a pandemic and this was real and people were...
Well, that's one of the only few reasons that you can remove those rights, is if it's a public health crisis. And that's what they're using, aren't they? You know, this is a public health crisis. This is... Now, whether the law is unlawful, that would come down to having to have a legal challenge against the government bringing the law into force itself. A judicial review. Yeah. Now, that a lot of it was judicial reviewed before the High Court, and I think the judgment was handed down in July 2020. It's certainly, I can't remember the case name of it, but it's on the videos that I put, because once I started getting questions from a number of people, I thought, well, I'll just do the research, and to save taking multiple phone calls from people who are all facing the same sort of problem, I thought I'd just do a video, and that sort of gives everyone the answer, and all those people, because it made me look into it and what I've seen and the heavy-handed tactics of the police. I can't help to think that there's something more sinister going on behind the scenes, because a police officer's got a discretion that they can use in any case of arrest, and they can choose to let someone, you know, it's not like they can't find you later on, is it? They go through doors every day of the week. They've got
intelligence. The city's completely cameraed up. It's not like they couldn't come and knock on your door.
Spy planes, well, yeah.
No, they could be there 9 o'clock to do what they did to say for you, for instance, and looked at that video. That is just a show of brute force to intimidate other people, to tell them, well, if this is what you plan to do, then this is what we're going to do to you. Now, me personally, if I was targeted and I know the law, and there's a lot of people who say, I was quite soft in comments I was making as in reply, you know me, Loz. I've been arrested for it and I don't know how many police officers, and I really don't care. A police officer is only a police officer when he is in the execution of his duty. The minute he steps outside of the execution of his duty, it depends on the person's capability who's going to deal with that officer, and then whether you're prepared to face the consequences.
He's a private citizen, isn't he?
He becomes not only a private citizen, but he comes subject. You can use what's known as a citizen's arrest.
Yeah, reasonable force.
I seen the police officers in town, and it was one video, and I was amazed watching them punching that guy in the face on the floor with that crowd around him and everyone standing. If I was there, I'd have told the entire crowd to charge, and I would have kicked fuck out of their business because they deserved it. They do not get to treat anyone in that way, what they've done. No. You know, you think this is a fixed penalty notice that they give you. Imagine being pulled over for not wearing a seatbelt, dragged out your car and punched.
But he wasn't just punched. He was obviously punched.
Battered.
No, but it was like it was an orchestrated event in that there was the two coppers that were doing it. One of them pulled the guy's head back, right, because he knew the spray was coming in, right. So he pulled his head back, looked away, right, and the other guy came in and just sprayed all his face. Right. I
think that was a different, because there was a couple of clips.
One.
I spent literally, I've been busy over there and I've been enjoying myself.
Yeah.
You know, I've gone from working serious cases of law to choosing
kicking out,
to choosing to carry mountain rocks, shovel stone, mix cement, build walls. You know, it's just, and I feel
real
so much.
Man's work.
Yeah. I feel so much better for it. You know, it's a lot cleaner work.
So just when you thought you were out, you've been dragged back in.
Sort of. I won't be dragged in that much. Most people suffer from the similar sort of things. So what I will do in the future is I'd look to do sort of videos on YouTube. I've had enough of law myself.
Because one thing that Lloyd's seen was one of the other protesters. This story hasn't been told yet. No one's showed any pictures of it. Is that one of the other protesters? He was nicked, beat, right, sprayed, and then taken back to the van to be put into the van, right? And he was in bits with his eyes like that. I think part of the protocol after CS gassing someone, you've got to give water and wash their eyes and wash their face. And Lloyd seen the copper walk the guy to the meat wagon, yeah. The guy's holding his face with the CS gas has been burning his eyes. The copper gets a bottle of water, pours 3/4 of it out onto the floor, right, and then gives the guy the last little bits of water to wash his eyes with. I mean, that's just like sadistic, isn't it? You know.
Sounds like something the brown shirts used to do.
Yeah. You know,
the day and age that we're living in, you know, you can have everything written down to set out protocols, but none of these protocols are followed at all. You know, half of the police don't know it. You know, so you used to think, or people say, you know, there's a few bad apples. There's not. There's a few good apples, and they're very, very rare. You know, I've been going in and out of police stations dealing with police my entire life. You know, one side on the wrong side of the law, one side on the right, and half the time I was on the wrong side of the law was just because of the people I knew, not because I was actually doing anything wrong. It's just the police have always been designed to be bullies. It's just a fair hand portion of society would not believe that, because they're able to pick the victim as well. I.e., if you've got a profile like me, skinhead, tracksuit, you know, you're fair game. And that sort of went for quite a number of people in Liverpool. Liverpool's an area which is renowned for crime and all sorts of violence, and we're all thugs, or we'll all rob your purse and rob the wheel trims off your cars. you still get it now. When
wheel trims. Don't have a fucking wheel
don't
trims
even have wheel trims. But yeah, you know, this is the profile that we've always had, and the police have had free reign in this city. It's the same, I think, for Manchester and a number of the other big cities, but it's a matter of time, isn't it? It's a matter of time before things change. And
what are your thoughts generally on the whole COVID situation? I mean, what's your analysis? Have you stopped to think about it, or you not spend too much time on it?
Well, I've stopped to think about it, Loz, because as you know, my dad died in July. You know, that was, for me, I'm travelling at that time. I've come home. I've done the lockdown. I've made sure my family's safe. I've then sat at the computer. I've done lots of research. I watched a video of a guy called Dr. Erickson from America, who was one of the first to come out with it. I can't remember his friend's name, but these were two doctors in a hospital in America, and they were talking about this disease and the immune system, and it made a lot of sense. These were professionals. Initially, when I came home, it was because of looking at videos and things that were going on in Wuhan, where you just seen people just walking with bags of shopping.
And now, I mean,
whether that was staged or
we
not.
haven't seen that anywhere else since, have we?
No.
Nowhere else since, right? And that was used at the very beginning to terrify people that this is how serious this outbreak is that people were falling flat on the face, dying. We've not seen anything, other than them initial images of which I now think is just total propaganda.
I think you've got the problem you've got is people in society who will listen to one-sided news. They're only used to switching on the TV. They only go to the mainstream media or read the papers, so they believe everything that they're told. And there's a lot of fear mongering going on. They told me that my dad had COVID. He went into hospital on 30th of June after spending...
What did he go into hospital for at the time?
He had a cancer growing here, a lymphome, and he didn't know it was cancer at the time. It was just a lump growing, and it was making his arm sore. It was, as it was touching his skin, if you like, it was like a bubble. So they basically fobbed him off. He went in at some time in the beginning of June. They fobbed him off with a course of antibiotics, just saying it was a lump. So he went home, he took that. I think it might have actually been May, not June.
Is that the beginning of the COVID outbreak?
Yeah, it was during the COVID where they weren't doing any other medical procedures. They were planning for, the hospitals to be overrun. So they fobbed him off. Then he had to go and get, is it a biopsy, where they take, so they had to take something out of the lump to test, but they didn't take enough. So it only created dead cells. So then they had to call him back again, and this was on the 30th of June. They gave him a COVID test then. I don't know why or for what reason.
The 30th of June.
The 30th of June. They gave him a COVID test and he came back as clear. They booked him in to have the second biopsy that they were going to take to see what the lump was. I think that was for the 6th of July. And then on the 6th of July, when he went in, they gave him another COVID test and he tested positive for COVID.
So he's been admitted to the hospital with lymphoma, and he's tested positive for COVID.
Well, he walked into hospital. He walked in. He was. There was nothing wrong with him. He didn't have underlying medical conditions. That was, we were thinking this is dark days. I was driving back and forth to Bulgaria at the time because I was taking some tools and things over that I need to do the jobs I was doing. And I was driving through Germany with my brother when my sister was calling me and saying how my dad was really ill. He was pleading with her to get him out of the hospital, saying about the way that he was treating him. They had them locked in this little corner room, and he thought, I think he'd spilt a drink or something, and one of the nurses had said something to him, whether she was being sarcastic, funny, or I don't know, but he's obviously took an offence to it because he's losing his mobility at this point. He couldn't get up. They put him on a syringe drive, so they're pumping him full of morphine. So we drove back, got to the hospital. They wouldn't let us see him, saying it was a COVID ward.
What hospital was he in?
Ain't Chief exactly. Said that they wouldn't let us see him, he's in a COVID ward, etc. But some Dr. Watkins, I think her name was, from memory, she comes to speak to us and, she's telling us there's nothing that we can do. This is, we might not make it to the end of the day. It was complete and utter shock because I was like, I was sitting with him 2 weeks ago talking to him about this lump. So we sat down, I'm going through things with her. And I'm saying, well, how does this work? How does these COVID tests work that you can tell? And how can he sit in the house for 9 months, hiding, not catch corona, come here, get sent home, and then come back the week later and he's got corona? The only place he's been is here. She said, well, I said, how can you rule it out against flu? So she said to me, well, we're not testing for flu this year. No, that was the first red flag. If I wasn't in such a state as to what I was with finding out this, they was telling me that because of some medication they'd put him on for these antibiotics, there was something that had thinned his blood. So they couldn't operate to remove the lymphome because his blood was too thin, it was too risky. Now, I recorded the conversation with her at the time. It's just in my nature to be on the ball with people like that. And and I wasn't too much on the ball because I've only just listened to it recently, and I'm thinking, how can it be too risky to carry out an operation on someone who you're saying is going to die later? You know, Article 1 of the human rights is the right to life.
Right to life.
That right to life is said to be absolute. Well, if it's absolute, it means it can't be taken away. And by refusing to treat someone, whether they call it the Liverpool care pathway or whatever they want to call it, it's murder. You know, you're refusing to treat someone when you've got an ultimate duty to do so. But anyway, you know, my focus at that time was that I managed to get in to see him after a little bit of fluffing and flapping with the doctors and nurses and them realising that I wasn't going anywhere. I won't say what I did, but let's put it like this. If I wasn't getting in to see him, there was going to be some damage caused to that hospital that day because there was no way my dad was going to be locked up.
Old school Heffey persuasion.
That was the suit came off. One suit came off and the other suit came back on. You know, they dressed me up in a gown, took me in to see him, and what I seen is, you know, this room was prison cells, you know, have PlayStations, curtains, you know, all sorts of clients that are on the most egregious of offences, murders, etc. You know, they've got nice rooms, really. The prison is hospitality suites, if you like. They're not too bad. They may well have control, but to treat people in their elderly ages like this...
Describe to me what the scene that you went into.
It was a cold, dark room. You know, it's a hospital room, so it's what you'd expect. But if it's for someone's end of life care, if you like, as to what they were saying, it was not somewhere where you'd want to see your last moments out dying alone in a bed. You know, it was like they sit round, they couldn't wait. And my dad, the only things he got to say to me was on that day, because when I took him home for the next 5 days, he was completely out cold. You know, he couldn't speak. The last conversations I had with him was in the hospital when he said to me to just get him out of there. So, you know, we just told the nurses, get his stuff packed, told us we couldn't take them. Said I'd be throwing him over my shoulder and taking him. There's no one here that's going to be stopping me. So we ended up taking him home. They gave us what I called a kill bag. This was just all sorts of... It was a bag filled with medicines of all different types. And I was just looking and reading the ingredients on them, you know, the side effects, what they did, and I thought, for every drug, it was a drug they're giving you for one pain, but then you need another drug to take away the pain that drug gives you, and that drug, I thought, what the fuck is this? It was literally a kill bag. We took him home to my brothers. We ended up getting a hospital bed. Tried giving, but it was too late. If we'd have been sooner, you know, you don't know. I read up on lymphoma, learned a lot about it, and it was a fully treatable cancer. I have no doubt in my mind that doctor killed him.
Did the hospital write that off as COVID?
Yeah, you know, they were saying it was corona, and I was saying, well, what's his symptoms? Because I'm having the argument with the doctor, and obviously I can't argue with the doctor on the medicines, but I'm saying, you know, well, okay, what's his symptom? Well, the test has just said he's got corona. He's got no symptoms. He's got nothing. He hasn't got an increased temperature. He hasn't got a cough. He's not short of breath. There was none of this. He was just in pain from this lump, and you could physically see it growing by the hour. You know, this was a really aggressive, especially at this stage. I don't know what stages it goes through along the time, but I felt it. This lump was 42 degrees. Which is quite hot. The rest of his body temperature was 36, 37, which is normal. My niece is a nurse, so she came round and she was awesome with the care that she gave. You know, me dad, she was there. She bought all charts that they have in the hospital, and we were measuring his blood. We bought equipment to be taking his blood, taking his pressure, giving him checking his blood. There was all sorts of things. I mean, I'm a bit lost by it myself. I was it must have been not in the best of time at that time.
Well, I'm sorry to hear that, Neil.
No, it's all right. It happens.
Yeah. So that's like a first-hand account, you know, of somebody who's actually been through this this system, you know, during this COVID operation. You know, you've seen it firsthand. I mean.
Well, you know, this is the one thing.
What you take away from that whole experience?
Just, you know, I look at people and I've seen a couple of videos on YouTube, which they make me fume. You know, you see people's loved ones locked up in hospitals, and, you know, they're telling them, oh, we've got to keep them separate. I would never put a loved one in the hospital. I wouldn't even let one go back into the hospital now after that. Believe it or not, in March, and this can be checked, in March this year when this came out, I spoke to Andy and Mark, who are the two partners in the firm, and basically it was a client of mine who'd contacted me.
Is this DDE?
DDE, yeah. The client of mine had contacted me, asking me about wills. He had a nurse who was in, of all hospitals, Aintree Hospital, and she wanted a will. But I do a lot of goodwill work for people as well as a lot of paid work. And because of the pandemic, and because it was said that all of these nurses and frontline staff are putting themselves up there, I didn't want to be charging for a will. I thought it doesn't take that long for a lawyer to do. They're done from templates, and as long as the estate is not complex, I can do a will for someone in 10 minutes. So I said, well, why don't we offer all the NHS staff in Liverpool and Merseyside a free will writing service? Let's do our bit for them. We were pretty much going into furlough for a number of staff because obviously courts were not operating as they would. Visits with prisoners, for instance, were not operating. You wasn't allowed into the prisons. So there was a number of free staff. So we advertised, and we've done hundreds and hundreds. I don't know exactly how many, but that was my idea of if I could turn back the clock, there's absolutely no chance I'd do it again. Absolutely not.
So I mean, right now we're just waiting on, I think it's 6 o'clock. Boris Johnson's going to make another announcement to tell us what latest, draconian measures he's going to put us under due to this so-called new outbreak, this new strain, this mutation of, the COVID-19 virus that is yet to be isolated, and now it's mutated into something else. And he's about to, put more restrictions on us, I think. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, at the end of the day, if this is so serious, then there should be repercussions for China, shouldn't there? Because this is a biological weapon that was released from China. It didn't come from a bat or some food species in some mysterious market.
So do you think that COVID-19 is a man-made bioweapon by the CCP as part of a growing...
Well, all the evidence suggests that.
Yeah.
I'm a man who looks at evidence for a living. And, once you start to do research, you'll come across a lot of sites with uncredible information, misinformation, and I think that's all part of the operation in itself, is to conceal the truthful evidence, or evidence that can be... A lot of evidence in court cases, for instance, will be circumstantial evidence, which is evidence of the circumstances. Now, it's not factual evidence. It doesn't nail someone down.
Though, isn't it?
It's persuasive evidence. Yeah. It's evidence of the circumstances, and unless you believe in too many coincidences, then, these things are being labelled conspiracy theories. They're not conspiracy theories.
Well, I think the only people who call you the conspiracy theorists now are communists.
No, we've got views on that bunch, haven't we?
It's a big red flag for me now. Someone calls me a conspiracy theory, go, you a communist, But so I think because of what's happening in America, because of what's happening with the election in America, and it's clear to anybody that's prepared to see that there is a coup happening in America, and the Chinese Communist Party are major players in that coup. And because of what's happening is we're starting to see lots of other news dropping about the influence that the Chinese Communist Party are having across the West. And we talked about this in a previous podcast, which was a week or two ago. It was announced that there was 2 million Chinese spies or Chinese communist spies embedded into businesses, corporations, students, whatever, in America and the UK, specifically those two countries. It was, mainstream news. And that for me was like, wow, okay, so this is part of a counter-offensive from the West to tell people that this is how advanced this plot is, to bring about global communist revolution led by the Chinese Communist Party because of their immense wealth and their influence across the world. And what are your thoughts on, have you been picking that up in the news, and what are your thoughts on how that affects Liverpool? Because this is, a stronghold.
I don't think it's a stronghold for communists. I think the communists in Liverpool are quite loud. I think they're paid a lot to go out and do the little dancing around with the pots and pans and hammering on jugs and getting on social media and ranting and trying to get people arrested. You know, I've dealt with a lot of people. The one thing I can say is the difference between the two is one side believe in principles and the other side are just doing it because they're being paid and they're being told to do it.
The job.
Yeah, it is actually a job. It's a disruptive job. You know, I don't believe myself that there's a right to anti-protest. I believe there's a right to protest, but when someone's going to anti-protest, by the very definition,
silence the protest.
Yeah, and then that is then where so I don't have to respect your human rights, right? I can not respect them, but the governments are supposed to defend and protect your human rights. So if I'm going to do a lawful protest and someone doesn't like what I'm going to do, they don't have a right to do anti-protest. That is just a recipe for disaster, to bring two opposing sides out to the street at the same time. That can be controlled a lot better by saying, well, okay, if you want anti-protest, set up your own protest day. Do your own protest day, right? We'll defend your right to protest as well as we'll defend their right to protest. On to the question about the communism. Communism's been around for a long, long time, hasn't it? It was just more hated by a lot of people and understood by a lot of people in the older times that it was a bad thing. These days, it seems to be a lot of...
rock and roll?
They're just like hippies with nothing to do, aren't they? You know, walking around dressing up as Jesus and doing all sorts of stupid, ridiculous things. It's sad that they've got nothing to do. They should really be put in factories by the very communists that the time will be taken up at some point, won't it? By them, but yeah. I'm not a fan of communism, but I'm not really too much into the political side of things either.
Yeah, no worries. Because I just found it, you know, if we're talking about COVID being a Chinese Communist Party operation, yeah, well, what scale is that on? I mean, you know, how deep do those tentacles run? You know.
Well, think of where the money comes from.
Yeah.
You know, China is a very rich, influential country.
But it's only been made rich because we've moved all of our manufacturing there.
Well, we've moved all of our manufacturing there, and China's earned a lot of its money from what we would usually call slavery. But,
well,
you know,
still do.
Well, we don't, do we? Because we're not calling it that. We're not calling them out for what they are. You know, communism is about putting everyone to work, and a few oligarchs at the top make the money.
Yeah.
And those oligarchs are the people that are setting up businesses all over the world. You know,
exactly.
They're capitalists, but they're global capitalists, or globalists, as Trump would call them. And that's exactly what they are. You know, when they're pushing, and you look at the Lobo loans crisis, for instance, there was a lot I went into years ago with the Liverpool City Council and others, and a lot of the finance that our governments and councils, local authorities are taking out comes from China money. You know, so this is where it's like the NFL in America, isn't it? A few people criticised China, and they were swiftly taken care of. Threats to remove advertising money, funding from the Chinese Communist Party, and that's how they control people. You want to control someone, you've just got to own them.
Own the money.
Own the money and pull the purse strings, and that's what they're doing with a lot of the governments.
So you've got a reputation as being a fearless fighter for your clients in the courtroom. You know, and you've developed yourself as a lawyer. You know, with rights of audience in various courts in and around the country. And you know, if I was ever in trouble with the police, shame you're in Bulgaria. I could have done with you a few weeks ago. There's no one else had one on my side, you know, to get me out of there. So how did you find yourself, you know, in this position where, you know, like a people's champion solicitor?
That easy, lads. I've sat on the other side of the table.
Yeah.
I know what it's like to, you know, to be kicked. I know what it's like to have someone turn up for you just as a process, not really asked about, you know, if you get terrible advice at a police station, your trial begins and ends there. And a lot of people, they're done and dusted from the minute they go into a police station. Police, they may well act stupid, but one of the biggest tools they get in any trial is the right of the inference. So they can invite, the judge gives a direction to a jury that they can draw an inference.
So this is if you're silent?
If you're silent, yeah. You
Because
hand them that right. That's a new weapon.
Let's just talk about that, right? But in fact, we'll get to that, because that's an important point that I want to talk about, is that, you know, the old way of doing it, which was no comment, you know, that's now changed the game, hasn't it? But how did you find yourself? You know, tell me the story about how you became involved with DDE. You know, where did that spring from?
I was having loads of problems, which I won't go into, about liability orders, etc. I had over 1,000 of them in my name. It went on for 6 years, runs into them bailiffs coming. I'm fighting with bailiffs left, right and centre. I'm being arrested, taken down police. Just never knew a solicitor at all I could get to fight me corner. Can be quite mouthy anyway.
Why was you challenging the liability orders in the first place? Was it you?
Well, that's a whole other story in itself, isn't it?
Tell us in a nutshell. Right. So did you become aware of the scam of council tax, and that was the reason why you decided to oppose?
Well, no, because I was in 2 points with this. Is I do believe that you should pay some council tax. I believe that there's got to be some form of payments from the public to fund this. We've met a lot of different people together, and we were all of different views, and we were all brought together by what you could call just government corruption in whatever form it was. It all affected us in different ways. With the liability orders, for me, it wasn't that I didn't believe in council tax. I don't believe in the rates that it's at now, and you know the way it's excelled. That's a whole another subject itself. It was more that they were putting liability orders in my name for properties that I hadn't even heard of. You know, they were using it as a weapon to send bailiffs and 6'5" thugs out.
To harass you?
Well, not just me. It was family or girl staff, etc. And I don't think they expected what, because after a bit, I just got tired of it and I started just knocking them out. And then I'm getting arrested. And I said it's self-defence. I said, if I tell him to leave my premises,
it's true.
Yeah, he's got a court order. Show me the court order.
It doesn't matter if he's got a court order. If he's trespassing and you tell him to go, then you're in your right to use reasonable force.
Every time I was let go, I was just let go, and it was just a means of inconvenience. Put me in a cell for 24 hours. You know, I'd be held for all. And then go, why can't you just interview me? You know, 24 hours, it's a long time. But I just geared myself up every time I went in the police station that I'm going to be there for the full 24 hours. It wouldn't matter what it was for. Then I got set up with an armed robbery or they tried to set me up with an armed robbery in 2012, which was September. This was Lancashire, Merseyside, and Cheshire forces came together, and this was because of the problems I was causing the council.
And what problems were you causing them?
Well, Jared Fitzgerald was investigated for fraud. He was the lead of the council. You see the video.
He was the CEO of Liverpool City Council.
He was the CEO. He was the guy who all the letters were coming from. You know, if someone's going to court and swearing an oath, apparently, for these orders. Well, if I don't own the property and I'm not living in it, well, someone's lying, aren't they? And you could think, well, for all those people that say about conspiracy theories, well, once is a coincidence, twice might be, 900 times.
We got 900 liability orders.
That's literally 900 odd liability orders. I can't remember the exact total, but it was about 900 liability orders. That's intent, you know, to be sending people round, because to the council it didn't cost them nothing. And most of the bailiffs were innocent. They just didn't know. They're coming round with these purported pieces of paper saying they're orders. The majority of the time he was attending with the police. This led me then, as I said, I got the arrest for the armed robbery, and then knowing how crooked the police were, I thought I've got to protect myself. So I was released on bail, goes away, but this time when I've got to hand myself in to answer bail, I goes with a lot of recording devices on me, and I recorded the police in the custody suite then, saying, well, what's he in for now, forensics, anything else? And it was Sergeant Paul Forster says, no, we don't... Sergeant Paul Forster asked, what's he in for? He's the custody sergeant. So this is a person who's accused of crime. It's their last line of defence, isn't it? You know, he is the person who either authorises my detention.
The custody sergeant, yeah.
He either authorises my detention or doesn't. Now, bear in mind, I've attended for a voluntary interview, and I'm being arrested, so they've brought me there under false pretences in the first instance. So then when I'm arrested, for the first time, I didn't resist. I'm taken through into custody, and the reason that they should have really realised, because every time I went into a police station, I wouldn't let them take a swab from me. I'd bite off the ends of the swab. Photographs that they'd take with off their hands on my face is old, and I'd just like to be awkward. It was a bit of fun. But this time, I takes me watches off. I'm stripping myself out. I'm handing everything over to the officer with a smile. And on the recording afterwards, they released me, gave me back the recording, and it recorded them basically saying that they didn't think I was guilty of it.
Well, so they took your recording device and they didn't know you were recording on it.
put it on. I did have a solicitor at the time.
Yeah.
Well, he was a police representative. He's the one who gave me the idea, and this is where it leads me to DDE. His name was Anthony Jones.
Yeah.
Now, he's quite a mouthpiece himself, coming, and I was listening to him and thought, well, that's all right. But there was a bit of a different relationship with us, because I knew a lot of law at this point. And I was like, I don't want you to represent me. All you're here for is to be my witness, because I used to get viciously assaulted in the police stations. So it was more to take note of what had gone on, and basically answer questions I wanted to answer, which I would whisper to him, and he would. I wouldn't interact with the police at all, which was quite lucky, because they were clearly trying to set me up. And on the recording, they said...
So what was the recording device?
I had a recording chip in the heel of my shoe. They take your shoes off you. That's outside the cell. I had a watch which was recording, so I pressed it on. So that was basically sitting on the custody suite while they're talking to the officers. So it gave me a good insight.
Awesome. So what did they say? Tell us what they said.
Well, they said, basically I was being arrested because they said there was forensic evidence linking me to this crime. So that's what they told the custody sergeant whilst I'm in front of the desk. So then I'm put in my cell. And then what they says is, what we're really looking for, although it says that the custody sergeant, Paul Forster, says, what's he in for? Is it forensics and anything else? They said, well, Sarge, although it says that on the PACE, which is the application for a warrant, which someone's sworn an oath to get, we're not convinced by the forensics. What we're really looking for is fresh evidence.
Confession.
The confession. The recording went on, and what they said is, well, to be honest, Sarge, he's a big landlord. We don't think he's guilty, but we're going to go at him anyway. Now
That's on the recording?
That's on the recording.
Wow.
That was the end of the case.
Yeah.
You know, that saved me from a potential 12, 13 years in jail. And it was only when I got that I realised the true lengths of... Because for me, I made complaints to a guy called Inspector Steve Tye, the chief constable. I had interviews with them. And for me, I said, that's a conspiracy to kidnap.
Totally.
I said, you cannot
That's
say...
pervert the course of justice.
Yeah, you cannot say that offer... He never got prosecuted, but he got made to take early retirement. A number of them did. You know, this caused a big ruckus for them, if you like, because I wasn't going to let it go. But that was...
So it's like over Christmas, I've been on a Christmas binge, right, of police interrogation videos. Did you ever watch them? Right, no. So it's on YouTube.
I'm normally in them.
So on YouTube, right, you know what it's like with a YouTube algorithm. Once you've watched one video, that's it. Your timeline's full of them. So I just started watching, chilling out over Crimbo, watching police interrogation videos, which is mainly in Canada, and it was just amazing, absolutely amazing. How, first of all, how many people speak to the police without a lawyer, and when they do speak to them, they're just singing like canaries, and they get these confessions from them. But there was other videos as well of how the police were fabricating evidence, right, in order to get confessions from people who were innocent. There was quite a few that I watched that were showing evidence of the police just making it up, and innocent people being either in prison for days, weeks, months, and finally when the evidence came out, these people got out. But it was pretty, harrowing that they're so blatant about doing it. It's a good job you had these recording devices. So did that lead you into the next phase of taking them on?
Well, that for me made me realise that this was justice was non-existent. Because you don't have the people fighting for you, and too many people have their own problems, and everyone is concerned when it affects them, but not so much when it affects someone else. And for someone like me, no one believed me. I mean, even my wife said to me, well, Neil, did you do it? Why would they say it? And I was like, for fucking hell, if you don't believe me, what chance have I got before a jury? Yeah. You know, bear in mind, I'm in a brand new car registered to myself, and I've gone and done this armed robbery. I was like,
in your own car?
In my own car. I've done an armed robbery in which they've tailed me from, arrested me, just not far from the scene of, and not found any gun. I was like, and this was the second raid, by the way. I'm going, what do you think I did with it? Do you think I swallowed the gun? Is there actually someone who can do that? You know, it was ridiculous, and this led me to come in and think, well, okay, people are having a rough draw. When you say that they can lie, they lie. There's case law that allows them to lie. So you can't believe anything that the police tell you. And I'd believe a thief over any police officer throughout time, because generally you can tell a thief when they're lying. Police, you can't, because you look at them and they're very deceiving, because they seem to be, you know, the one thing that rips me apart in interviews is listening to police officers go, you know, this is your turn to put your side of the story across. We'll investigate it for you. They're not interested. You know, for them, you're just a number.
Isn't the Police and Criminal Evidence Act 1984 PACE, which you're entitled to whenever you get arrested, to sit there and read?
Well, you're not entitled to the entire legislation of PACE, just the codes of practice.
Right, that affects them while you're in there. But wasn't that introduced because of the Birmingham 6, or one of the other big miscarriages of justice, where the police were putting in false evidence that saw innocent people put away for 15 years or more? And that was the result of it. You know, once the Birmingham 6 were brought out, then they said, we've got to do something about this because it's getting that bad. And the reform was PACE, which gave a little bit more regulation for police misconduct.
Well, you can call it reform all you want. You know, you've got the Financial Ombudsman Service, which closed down, haven't you? What did they replace that with? The Financial Services Authority, and then the Financial Conduct Authority. They changed the names of everything, or put in new procedures to try and get the appearance that there's going to be some changes. The police are just as corrupt now as what they've ever been, you know, because some of them, they may well just think someone's guilty, so it doesn't matter to them how they get them.
As long as they get them.
I don't have that same viewpoint that they may well have. I can understand from the police's point of view a lot of people that they might well deal with, because some people can be a bit of a headache. But their goal is to just go out and get someone by any means necessary, not to stumble across them or find some form and do a proper investigation. You know, that would take time and effort. And why would they need to, when the higher ups are not really bothered themselves? You know, these corrupt practices that they do go from top to bottom, and they're authorised, and you know, it's authenticated by the courts, because the courts allow this to go on. There's no two ways about it. We don't have the same laws as like America, where you've got the poison. If something, say for instance, a search warrant is incorrect in America, then everything that flows from that search warrant becomes inadmissible as evidence. We don't have that. You know, we've got a court that say, oh well, just because he was that bad on that doesn't mean that he was bad on everything else. So that's all right. You know, and these are the protections that we do need. Is the onus should be on the police to prove the cases when it's not. You know, and they're too corrupt at what they do.
So did this lead you to start taking law a bit more seriously? Because did Albion follow this? Is this?
Well, this was, my mum said to me, I remember being in one day in Sutton Estates, and my mum said to me, because I was quite, I used to use my hands a lot, and that was the way I'd just resolve situations. I come from Kensington. It's the way most people from there resolve situations.
Creative with your hands.
Creative with my hands, yeah. And my mum said to me, Neil, why are you so violent? You know, she said, the pen is mightier than the sword. You've got a brain, use it. And it wasn't that I was violent. I said, Mum, how do you deal with people you're writing letters to? I went through Freeman stuff. I went through all the common law. I was researching quite a lot. And then I just thought to me, Mum, well, maybe you're right. Maybe that's not the answer, because I felt I was constantly, you know, just giving them an easy shot at me. So this led me then to look at law, which is when I looked and I found you. You did the EX96 on the bailiff versus the banks. Various other people that was meeting in Wetherspoons, etc. You know, I travelled up and down the country, and we met and we decided to do a group.
Well, we formed a group, didn't we, called Albion Law Academy, and it was, you know, it was just a group of people who all came together with the same intention of wanting to try and enforce our rights, find our freedoms, and use the common law, you know, and trusts and equity and all those things. And it was a really great period. I really loved look back at it fondly because it was an amazing energy, you know, what we did at that time. And what were your thoughts on that?
Well, it was that was the beginning for me, as I always thought that the final fight happens in a courtroom. You know, it doesn't matter whether you're innocent or guilty. If a courtroom declares you guilty, it's what everyone's going to believe. So ultimately, that's the end game. You know, you can go.
You haven't got any rights unless you can enforce them.
Well, you haven't got the rights unless you can enforce them, and it's very hard to enforce them as well because, you know, the odds are stacked against you. Just because people are found guilty doesn't necessarily mean that they're guilty. It just means they're being found guilty by a system that is designed to find them guilty. And this is what led me to think, well, if you remember from Albion, we were representing a lot of people, if you like, or it was like a law library.
Well, we were mainly taking on bailiffs, weren't we? Bailiffs and police misconduct, people who've been arrested falsely, and, you know, vulnerable people who were facing bailiffs constantly for, you know, fraudulent crap by the banks and, you know, the councils, and we were just trying to provide them with a service, you know,
it was a charitable service. A mixed bag.
It was a mixed bag.
There must have been, I think, 10 of us that was really full on with it, and then there was a couple of stragglers, and there was about 70 people a week that was coming to the little shows we were putting on, if you like, getting speakers, and each of us dealt in different areas, and it was just a means of saying, you know, we're all suffering, let's come together and teach each other the skills we've picked up or help
and
where
see
we
if
can.
We can get organised.
But, you know, as you know, we were attacked by idiots at that time, and it just become like, you know, it distracts you from what you want. We didn't get so much attacked.
No, we did get attacked, right? And I don't think we were prepared for it. I was like, what?
Well, why did you attack someone who's doing something good?
Where's this coming from? Why is it coming from our own, in our own city, by our own people? And it was surprising, it was dispiriting, and ultimately we went off in different directions after that. But you stuck with it, and Albion Law charity kind of morphed into DDE Law.
Well, what it did, I mean, DDE Law was a company set up in 2008 by some other partners. I was approached by by Mark first, asking me to take cases in. I was very suspicious of him, you know, why he'd come to me.
I remember that first meeting.
Me and you, wasn't it? We had him cornered in the room in the library. Like a little piece of prey. Very suspicious of him at the time. But it did give us the ability to... You see me traveling.
You went serious, didn't you? You know, you became a lawyer, man. You actually became a lawyer.
You see me traveling the country, bouncing into courts, fighting for rights of audience, defeating them on knowledge. You know,
but you shouldn't brush over this, because this is a great achievement by yours. Is that for people that don't know, rights of audience means your ability to address the judge, right? To speak to the judge if you're not the litigant in person, if you're not defending yourself. You can't just bring someone else in to address the judge on your behalf unless they're, you know, law society or solicitors, unless you've developed a relationship with either the court or your CV is strong enough that the judge will grant you the right of audience, and you were getting them just by the sheer force of your personality.
Well, that was it. It was just a case of arguing on the law. And the one thing I used to argue with the judges, which got them all the time.
Would you say you're the man who likes arguing, Neil?
Live for it. I do. You know, I like it. But the thing is when you've got someone who is, let's say you've got someone who has got a real grievance, they can't get a lawyer because lawyers cost a fortune, right? And even if they could afford one, it's the odds are against them whether they're going to get someone who's going to argue the case properly for them.
Fight for them.
Yeah. And some of them have got intelligence, but they don't have. They just lose everything when it comes to standing before them. Me, I didn't care. They dragged them beating me that much that none of them scared me. It was, for me, it was like, my freedom is a state of mind. You can take my body and put it where the fuck you want, but you will never take my freedom. And that...
Your Braveheart moments in the court, isn't it?
I was always like that, you know. Once you've been kicked that many times and you've been beaten, you become conditioned to it. Yeah. It's like being a fighter. You go to the gym, you know, if you're never used to being it and you get it in the ribs, you're going to go down like a sack of shite. But if you're used to training and you're used to taking some of them hits, then you might well still be standing after a couple. I'd just been conditioned to the police brutality. I remember the registration of the very first police van I was ever thrown in when I was 14, K404 OKD. Merseyside Police can check that out. That's an actual Merseyside police van. That's from the age of 14, thrown in the back of for walking up the street of Kenny, mattress thrown over me, and just jumped all over for fuck all. Didn't even, still to this day, don't even know what it was for.
So would you say that, you know, when we're looking to try and psychoanalyze where this all comes from, is that the defining moment? Is that where this unquenchable thirst for revenge?
Well, it is, isn't it? You know, first when you get bullied, you want to hide and you want to avoid. But when you're dealing with an army of bullies, that's all in a uniform and there's nowhere to hide. You've ultimately got nowhere to go but to stand and fight.
Yeah.
And I wasn't a fighter as a kid. I was a brawler. I could have a brawl or whatever, but I wasn't a fighter. But after, you'd have your problems and what have you, and you'd have your people that you think, I'm going to come after you one day. You take yourself to fighting. And I got trained by Bernie and Gary Geum in the martial arts studio.
Where was that?
In Long Lane.
Okay.
I trained with them for just 10, 12 years, 3 times.
By Long Lane ABA, the boxing? Because we had Barry in here who trained... Barry Maguire, he trained in Long Lane, but it was the ABA, it was the boxing gym.
It wasn't boxing, it
was
mixed martial arts. So I did Muay Thai, kickboxing, taekwondo. I did all sorts of different things. I trained with fighting with weapons, knives, etc. There's quite a lot that I did with them, and that sort of prepared me then. My aim in learning to fight was to fight back against the police. When you get in fight, I've had a number of altercations with police officers where I've been arrested and I've ultimately been released at the end because the police officer has acted outside of the execution of his duty. So at the end of the day, he's as fair game as someone walking up to you in the street and putting their hand to you. Just because he wears a police uniform doesn't make him something special or something you should give high regard to. Me, I treat people with the same respect as they treat me.
So this journey that you've been on, this struggle, this fight, it's a sense of wanting to be treated fairly with justice because of, this injustice that you felt when you were younger growing up in Kensington. Would you say that's where this is all sparked from?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I'd say there was one. I mean, this was quite funny because I was working with him on a case not so long ago and he didn't even know. There was a guy called Neil Larson and he's now in the murder squad in the police. But back then he was just like this little runt of a busy on Kenny who just used to go around tormenting, all of us. He took me to Wavertree Park. Him and a guy called Ian McLaughlin, I think his name was. And he took me to Botanic Park, stripped my clothes off me, strip searched me in the street, then started spreading rumours because I wouldn't give them information, asked me for information on who's who in Kenny, etc. And I wouldn't talk to them, said that they were going to spread rumours that I was a grass, and I believe they actually did go around and spread these rumours. But this is what the police tactics was like. I moved out to Kensington not long after that. I think I was about 18, 17 or something when I moved out there.
So Kensington and Liverpool is not like Kensington and London, is it?
No. No.
A little bit different.
Somewhat.
Yeah.
I don't know, it's supposed to be becoming quite the same nowadays. If you've been down to Kensington and London, it's not.
Go on, so tell me about the murder squad guy.
So I'm working with him on a case. He's on a case. I'm in a police interview.
No way.
Sitting in a police interview whilst he's sitting there questioning my client. And I was just so obnoxious and arrogant, as in I just stopped him doing his job, right? Which is what my job is. My job when I turn out to a police station for someone is not to just allow the free flow of questioning to go and, a complete abuse of the police just getting through and mount the questions and just leave the clients. Clients will sit there and they'll be told to go no comment. And that's mainly because it's not in the client's best interest. It's in the solicitor's best interest. They get paid the same money if they're there for 10 minutes or 2 hours, 3 hours, 10 hours, doesn't matter. The same money is what they get for the case. So you can think, if I can be out of the police station in 20 minutes, much better for me, isn't it?